All right, lesson 2 of chapter 9, labor market discrimination. We're going to reanalyze lesson 1, but in lesson 2, we're going to assume the workers are perfect substitutes and not perfect complements. And again, this model is inspired by Professor Walter E. Williams' article, Minimum Wage and Discrimination. Again, we're going to look at, slow typist versus fast typist. We have the labor demand and the labor supply over in this Desmos model. Right, we got two Desmos models here. This is labor demand, this is labor supply, and then we got the other Desmos model, labor demand for fast typist and labor supply for fast typist, right? And we have to come up with the equilibrium. So let's go back to the slow typist equilibrium. So I'm just using the same exact graphs I did for lesson 1, except I just changed the equations, right? So the equilibrium level of employment for slow typist is 66. And again, these are in hundreds, right? So E is in hundreds. So this is actually 6,600, right? Because we have the 100 there. And the wage, the market wage for slow typist is $11.50 per hour, right? And then we'll do the same for the fast typist. 32 fast typist is the equilibrium, but again, these are in hundreds, right? So this is actually 3,200. So 3,200 fast typist. And their market wage is a second number, $28.52 per hour, right? Dollars per hour. The intercept of the labor demand curve for slow typist, we'll go back to the slow typist model. Here's a slow typist model here. The intercept of the labor demand curve for the slow typist implies that firms are willing to pay up to $21.40 per hour to hire the first slow typist. The intercept of the supply of slow typist implies that a slow typist, there's at least one, with a reservation wage equal to $1.6 per hour. The reservation wage of the 6,600th typist, the last one hired, the height of the labor supply curve at 6,600 is $11.50 per hour. This is the market wage. So the marginal worker, if you will, sets the marginal worker and the marginal firm sets the market wage, right? Firms are willing to pay. The labor demand curve reaches a maximum at this 6,600 level of 11.5, right? So the labor supply curve reaches a minimum at 66. The labor demand curve reaches a maximum at 66, right? So again, the marginal firm and the marginal worker set the market wage of $11.50 per hour. Now, to calculate the total surplus, we have to calculate the area of the triangle produced by these three black dots, right? And the height of the triangle is 21.4 minus 1.6. And the width of the triangle is 66 minus 0, right? So we have the height, which is this difference, and the width, which is 66 minus 0. So let's calculate the consumer surplus or the total surplus. So we have one intercept at 21.4 minus the other intercept at 1.6. We're going to multiply that by the difference in 66 and 0, right? So we're going to multiply the width of this triangle is the 66 minus 0, or just 66. And then if we do this right here is an area of a rectangle. We want the area of a triangle, right? So we're going to divide this by 2. So the total surplus is $653,400, right? $653,400 is actually $65,340, right? Now we're going to do the same thing for the fast typist, right? The fast typist. The intercept of the labor demand for fast typists implies that firms are willing to pay up to $32 per hour for that first typist hired. Okay. The intercept of the supply of fast typists implies that there is at least one fast typist who has a reservation wage of $17.32 per hour. The reservation wage of the last typist hired, in this case, the 3,200th fast typist, right? The value on the labor supply curve is 28.52, right? 28.52. Firms are willing to pay that last fast typist hired a wage rate no greater than what? Well, you can't get higher than the labor demand curve here at 28.52. So again, the marginal fast typist and the marginal firm hiring fast typist, they set the market wage. Now, again, we got to calculate the surplus, right? The surplus is the difference between these two intercepts and the difference between 32 and 0, right? 32 minus 0 is the width of the triangle. 33.32 minus 17.32 is the height of that triangle. And we got to divide those, that product by 2, right? So the one intercept is 33.32. We're going to subtract off the other intercept, 17.32. We're going to multiply that by the employment level, which is 32, actually 32 minus 0, right? 32 minus 0. But that's just 32. And then that's a rectangle. That's the area of a rectangle. And the area of a triangle is half a rectangle. So the surplus for the fast typist labor market is $256,000, right? In dollars, it's $25,600, right? To get the total surplus, we're going to add the labor market surplus for slow typist to that of fast typist, right? So we got 256 plus 653.4. And so we have a total surplus of $909,400. In dollars, that's $90,940, right? Okay. Now, at firm R, suppose fast typists are perfect substitutes with slow typists, because although it offers expensive express services and inexpensive slow services, it can hire 2 slow typists to do the work of 1 fast typist. Firm's R marketing department says the firm's expected demand is 90 boxes of typed pages at a market price of $10.13 per box. Firm R's isoquants are shown with its current ISO cost. The green line is the current ISO cost. And there's 3 isoquants. Now, in reality, there's going to be infinite many, right? At point O, firm R hired 32 fast typists, right? And 0 slow typists. At that point, firm R will produce what? So we're here, right? Because we have 32 fast typists and 0 slow typists. Anywhere along this red line, we're able to produce 90 boxes of typed pages, right? So R is going to produce 90 typed pages. Now, how much does it cost to produce those 90 pages at this point? Well, we're going to have to multiply 32 times the wage of fast typist. And the wage of fast typist was what? 28.52. And we're going to have to add that to 0 times the wage of slow typist. And the wage of slow typist is 11.50. Okay, so the cost of that production is $912.64, right? With firm R's revenue equaling what? Well, to get the revenue, we got to multiply this price, $10.13 a box, times the output of 90, right? To get the revenue, we got to multiply the price per box times the 90 boxes that are produced. And we get a revenue equal to $911.70. And its economic profit is going to be what? Well, the economic profit is the revenue minus the cost. The economic profit is an economic loss of negative 0.94. So, recognizing that they're making a loss, what does firm R going to do? Well, it's going to lower its cost and raise its profit, right? It knows it can sell 90 boxes. Marketing says, hey, you can sell 90 boxes at that price. So we're going to hold output constant along this isoquant, right? And what we're doing here is going to move from point O to this new F point, right? And at this F point, notice that the ISO cost line is closer to the origin. Now, if the ISO cost line shifted all the way to the origin, the cost of producing anything would be 0 because we have 0 fast typist hired and 0 slow typist hired, right? So an ISO cost line that passes through the origin represents 0 cost. So as the green line, the ISO cost lines, move toward the origin, costs are lower, and we're going to show you that here, right? At this point F, firm R is hiring 22 fast typists and 20 slow typists. And it's able, with this combination of typists, to produce 90 boxes per day, right? Now, what's that going to cost? Let's go back here to our cost calculation. This is the wage of fast typist. This is the wage of slow typist. I had to change the 32 to 22 fast typist, right? And I got to change the 0 to 20 slow typist. So the cost is now what? The cost has been lowered, right, to $857.44. The revenue is still 911.7, right? Because we're still producing 900 boxes or 90 boxes at $10.13 per box, right? So now the economic profit is what? The cost is 857.44, and we're subtracting that from the revenue, right? So now we're making an economic profit of $54.26, right? The 6 makes that 5 of 6, right? We round it. Okay, so as we move up this isoquant line, this red one, we're lowering our cost and raising our economic profit. So now the point F is shifted further up the red line, right? Further up the quantity equal 90 isoquant line, right? So now from R moves to the new point F. At that point, firm R hires 12 fast typists, right? 12 fast typists and 40 slow typists. Okay, so it can produce 90 boxes of type pages that cost what? So let's go back to our cost here. Now the firm is only hiring 12 fast typists and 40 slow typists, right? 40 slow typists, 1150, and 12 typists at 2852 for a cost of $802.24. The revenue is still $911.70, right? Because we're still producing 90 boxes, right? Its economic profit would be what? Well, we got to replace this cost with the new cost, right? And the new cost subtracted from holding the revenue constant gives an economic profit equal to 109.46, right? Firm R is going to do, it's going to further lower its cost. At the same time, keep output at 90 boxes of type pages, right? And so it ends up at this point here, this black point, where it is hiring 64 slow typists and 0 fast typists, right? That's point F. I notice the green line has shifted further in, right? So at point F, the firm hires 0 fast typists, 64 slow typists. It's still producing 90 boxes, right? Still producing 90 boxes because we're on this red isoquant. The revenue is still $911.70 because quantity hasn't changed and the price hasn't changed. But what about the cost of 0 typist and 64 slow typist? Okay, so now we got 0 fast typist and 64 slow typist. The cost have been lowered to $736. With the cost lowered to $736, the economic profit is $175.7, right? So this is going to be the optimal solution if it desires and can sell 90 boxes of type pages. Okay. So since firm R's marketing department reported that the firm's expected demand will be 90 boxes of type pages at a market price of $10.13 per box, its costs are minimized when it hires 0 fast workers and 64 slow typists. So that's its optimal solution, right? So it was originally here, but it learned that it can lower cost by being here and then not affect its revenue, but increase its economic profit by lowering its cost. Now that we understand this model, let's go on to the discrimination part. As a result of the lower quality education Black students received in 1950, suppose the lower paid typists are Black because they only had one typing class in high school due to limited resources. So they could only take a typing class once in 4 years. So their skills are going to be a lot less than the higher paid white typists who went to schools that could afford a bunch of typewriters and offer a typing class to the white students every semester of high school. So the white students are going to have better keyboarding skills, right? Now the wage differential, let's go ahead and delete this stuff here. The wage differential I'll go ahead and delete that too. So at the market wages, the fast typist, the white typist, their wage is $28.52. The black wage is $11.50. So the wage differential is 17.02, right? Per hour. Suppose the owner of firm R's racism overpowers the profit motive and a result refuses to hire black typists. Firm R's discriminatory hiring policies result in how many white workers hired? If this firm expected to sell 90 boxes of type pages, then they would be here if they didn't want to hire any black workers, right? So that goes back to the original solution, right? This firm hired 32 fast typists and 0 slow typists, right? So due to differences in educational attainment, skill attainment via education, 32 white typists are hired, 0 black typists are hired, and the economic profit is equal to what? Well, let's go back and find out the economic profit. The economic profit is a negative, right? So this discrimination leads to an economic loss. If firms A, B, C, D, and E are identical to firm R, and their owners are racist, but are motivated by only profit, their hiring practice will result in what? Well, they'll minimize cost and maximize profit by hiring 0 white workers who they prefer to hire. And instead, they'll hire the 64 black workers who they prefer not to hire, right? So they're going to hire 0 white typists and 64 black typists. And because of that, they're going to make an economic profit of $175.7, right? Thus, firm R will what? It's not going to thrive. The discrimination is going to cause this firm to go out of business, right? Suppose the owner of firm R reads Thomas Leonard's paper in the Journal of Economic Perspectives and learns about the racist history of the minimum wage. According to Thomas Leonard's research, quote, minimum wage protects deserving workers from the competition of the unfit by making it illegal to work for less, end quote, and quote, wage competition not only lowers wages, it also selects for the unfit races. Now, Thomas Leonard is pointing out the racist history of the minimum wage. These aren't his views. These are the views of economists and academic elites and politicians of the day, right? And when those academic elites, economists, whatever, are talking about deserving workers, they're referring to basically white Protestant workers. And the unfit, in the minds of these sick people, are people of color, black people who are moving from Jim Crow South into places like Boston, New York, Detroit, Chicago. They're also referring to Asian people of Asian descent, or Eastern European descent, or Irish descent, and even Italian descent. Those are the unfit in the sick minds of these people, right? So agreeing with these hideous progressive era concepts, he proposes a minimum wage rate of $20.23 per hour, right? This guy knows he's going to go out of business. He wants to force the discrimination. He wants to enforce his discrimination on his competitors who are not discriminating, even though they're racist, right? So he's proposing a minimum wage rate of $20.23. And when you read the work of Walter E. Williams, may he rest in peace, he did similar research in South America or South Africa under apartheid, under the apartheid system in South Africa. And this is pretty recent history. According to Walter Williams' research, he discovered that labor unions who were only admitting white male workers, they were in favor of raising minimum wage rates. Why? Because the black workers in South Africa, they were working for a lower wage than the unionized white workers. So colorblind firms or non-colorblind firms who seek profits were, instead of hiring the more expensive white union labor, they were hiring the ununionized black labor at a lower wage rate. And so the labor union proposed minimum wage laws. And I suspect they made this argument. They were making this argument, in my opinion, to do what? Was we wanted to lift the people's living standards, right? Well, that's what they say, but what it do? Well, it lifted artificially the black wage just under the union wage rate of white workers. And so it made the black labor wage roughly equal to, but not exceeding that of white union wage. And so what these racist firms did is they just hired the white union workers instead of the black workers. And you had high unemployment amongst black workers in South America, right? So it's a fascinating research that Walter E. Williams performed, fascinating research, right? Okay, so this owner who is racist is trying to use the law to force his racism and his decisions on his competitors, because he knows the competitors will win. They're going to have economic profit. He's going to have economic losses, and he's going to be kicked out of business. So how do you force competitors to discriminate? Well, you enact a minimum wage. Now, to ensure it is enacted, he sells it to the public as a means to raise the standard of living for all typists. In fact, he's trying to force, in reality, he's trying to enforce his racist outcome, right? After the minimum wage is enacted, it becomes illegal for firms to hire typists below 2023, right? Dollars per hour. Notice this red line here. This is at the minimum wage here, 2023. The wage can't go below this red line. Because the wage can't go below this red line, only a few black type. Notice this has been changed to black typist here. Notice, due to poor educational opportunities in the 1950s, notice that only a few of the black workers will be hired. Very few of them will, right? At this artificially high wage, black typists want to work, right? Almost 125 of them want to work. Only very few of them actually get jobs. So the distance from here, from this intersection to this intersection, is the number of black unemployed typists. Because the minimum wage in this market is binding. The minimum wage is not binding for white typists, because the wage is above the minimum wage, right? And this, I read an article one time about a New York Republican on Long Island in the 1960s, or I think it was the 1960s. I don't remember the politician's name, but he was a member of the House of Representatives from Long Island. And he proposed a national minimum wage, probably for the same reasons as this hypothetical owner firm are, right? To lift up the people, the poor, to give them a living wage. He wanted to enforce a federal minimum wage because firms in New York were leaving New York for places in Alabama. And the reason was, in New York, the wage was high. In Alabama, the wage was low. So if you're a firm in New York and you want to take advantage of the low wage work in Alabama, and you're in a high wage state. How do you hire the workers in Alabama? Well, you move your factory to Alabama, right? So if this minimum wage is in fact enacted, right, then, and maybe it's enacted at the wage in New York, right? So if the red line is up here instead, right? If the red line is up here instead of down here, then firms aren't going to move to Alabama because Alabama firms would be forced to pay this wage in Alabama. They're already paying it in New York, so the firms aren't going to move. So in the way the policy was proposed by this particular member of House of Representatives in the 1960s, it was actually proposed as a way to force or coerce or encourage firms not to leave New York for places like Alabama, right? Now, the effect of this policy results in what kind of unemployment among Black typists? Well, in order to do that, we have to impose the minimum wage in Desmos, right? So I'm going to impose the minimum wage here. Now, W is the y-axis, right? So in order to draw a flat line in Desmos, I have to type y equal, right? And I'm going to do y equal 20.23. Okay, I got to hit the wrench here, and I got to stretch the x-axis. I'll do 150. There we go. And I'll make the lines, I'll make these two black to match it up with my open math. Okay, so these are the Black typists, the ones that receive the poor education, right? The poor training, because they're going to inner city public schools where resources are really limited, right? And those public schools face no competitors, right? Poor people have to go to the bad inner city public school because they have no choices, right? They have no choices. And then let's impose the minimum wage. Again, we have to do y equal the minimum wage. And the minimum wage is 20.23. And then we got to reset the x-axis. So, I don't know, 100. There we go. All right, so let's calculate the unemployment rate in the Black labor market. So the number of Black people that are hired at this new minimum wage is 7.8. That's the employment level, right? The employment level. The labor force is 124.2. So the number of people unemployed, the number of Black people unemployed is 116.4. We're going to divide that difference by the labor force. So this is the labor force size. This is the employment level. This difference is the unemployment level. And then we divide the unemployment level by the labor force size. And we multiplied it to turn it into a percentage, right? And we get 93.72% unemployment in the Black labor market. Now, in the white labor market, the wage is up here, right? So the number of people who are employed, number of white people who are employed is 32. The number of white typists who want a job is 32. So the unemployment level in this labor market is 0. And we divide that by the labor force size and multiply by 100, and we get a 0% unemployment rate amongst white typists. Because the policy increases the wage rate of Black workers relative to white workers, firms R, A, B, C, D, and E all minimize their costs by hiring 32 white workers and 0 Black workers. Why is this ISO cost line flatter? The reason why that is because the slope of the line was what? With this being white typist, the slope of the line is the white typist wage. And this case, the white typist wage initially was what? 28.52. And the black wage initially was what? 11.5. So the slope of the line originally was almost 2.5. So it's really steep, right? And so you can get lower costs by being here. But with the minimum wage law being enacted, the minimum wage, right, forces the black wage up to 2023, right? So now you have to pay black typists 2023. So we're going to replace the 11.5 with 2023. And now the slope is only 1.41, right? So the slope of the line basically rotates to a flatter line, right? And so if we push this isocost line up to here, that's going to represent a higher cost, right? Remember, isocost lines that are closer to the origin represent lower cost. So the minimum wage law rotates the isocost line, so it's flatter than the isoquant. And so this point becomes the cost minimizing level, right? So all the firms are going to discriminate, right? The law forces them to discriminate. They're going to hire 32 white workers, white typists, and 0 black typists. With that costing how much? Well, let's calculate the cost again. The white workers are being paid the market wage of 28.52, and there's 32 of them, right? The black workers are being paid 2023 if they can find work, times 0, right? Black typist. So the cost is $912.64. The revenue, right? The revenue is still what? Output is still 90, right? And the cost, the price per box was 1013, right? So the revenue is $911.70. The economic profit is the 911.7 minus the cost of 912.64. Now all firms are making an economic loss, right? So firm R forces the other firms into making economic losses, because if firm R knows that if it doesn't get this minimum wage passed, it's going to be out of business, right? And maybe this is the reason why some jobs in America are outsourced to other countries, right? Because these regulations and rules that are sold to help the poor create economic losses for firms in the United States. So maybe what they're doing is now, right, instead of having a binding minimum wage in North America, maybe they go to Mexico, right? Where Mexico's living wages down here below 10, right? It's not binding, but it is binding the US. So one way to lower costs is to offshore your operations to another country.